Majestic civilizations forge grand legends. These narratives mirror humanity's perception of existence, the rhythm of life and death. While deities in most mythologies resemble mortals, Chinese gods are distinctly different. Their cosmos is structured like a colossal empire where even celestial beings adhere to cosmic laws. In this celestial empire, the Jade Emperor reigns as the omnipotent creator and administrator. Below him operates a divine bureaucracy, ministers overseeing elemental forces, judges monitoring mortal karma, and countless scribes recording deeds and decreeing afterlives. This world is founded on established laws, sacred rituals, and profound order. Even death doesn't signify an end, but a transition through 10 infernal courts where lives are meticulously reviewed. Following this judgment, a soul is granted a new existence through reincarnation. Everything follows a precise system governed by rules. Yet, where there are rules, there will inevitably be transgressors. One day, an unexpected visitor arrived at the heavenly palace, a monkey born of stone. Unlike any other, she rejected her mortal destiny, yearning for greater things. She mastered arcane arts, honed combat skills, pilfered peaches of immortality, and declared herself equal to the emperor. An army was dispatched, sages were summoned, and attempts were made to subdue her by force, but none could overcome her might. In other myths, heroes don't battle gods. They reshape the very fabric of the world. When a catastrophic deluge inundated China, people cried for aid, but the Celestials offered no intervention. Then, a man named Yu the Great took action. He didn't attempt to fight the elements or confront the surging waters directly. Instead, he reshaped the rivers themselves, constructing canals and redirecting streams. The floodwaters receded, and the people could once again inhabit their land. Salvation wasn't found in warfare, but in reason, knowledge, and diligent effort. Such tales endure, visible in Chinese architecture, festive celebrations, and martial arts. Even the very structure of the state, prioritizing order and discipline, echoes the celestial empire, where everything is subservient to law. However, before delving into gods, heroes, conflicts, and myths, it's essential to grasp the essence of this world. For once, there was no sky, no earth, nor even the emperor himself. There was only the void, a formless chaos, and one day, from it was born a giant. When time itself had not yet begun, chaos permeated the universe. It was boundless and formless, its elements intermingling, arising, and vanishing like an elusive mist. Yet, within this profound chaos, a new order began to stir. At its core lay a cosmic egg, brimming with pure energy, encompassing yin and yang, light and darkness. Within this enclosed space slumbered the giant Pangu. He was unaware of his destiny, nor that the world around him had yet to materialize. For him, time did not exist. Thousands upon thousands of years elapsed until, one day, Pangu opened his eyes. The first thing he perceived was darkness, enveloping him, pressing in from all sides, filling every fiber of his being. The surrounding world felt confined, compressed into a singular entity. He attempted to move, but the space offered no freedom. Then he knew that he could reshape this world. He reached out and felt the edge of the shell. It was as solid as stone. But within himself, he felt a surge of fury and resolve. He grasped an axe, forged from his very will, and swung it with immense force. A crack resounded through the void, and the surrounding world began to tremble. Fault lines spread across the egg, and with each subsequent blow, Its walls fractured further. Finally, the shell shattered, its fragments scattering in all directions. Light, pure elements shot upwards, thus giving birth to the sky. All that was heavy, dense, and unwieldy sank downwards, forming the earth. But as the shell vanished, Pangu observed that the world was still unstable, ephemeral as morning mist. The sky barely held its position, threatening to collapse and merge once more with the earth, reverting to primordial chaos. He understood then, if he did not support them, the world would cease to exist. He straightened to his full height, planted his feet firmly on the ground, and braced his hands against the sky, preventing its descent. Each day he grew, becoming taller and stronger, and with him, the universe expanded. A void emerged between the earth and the sky, a space where the giant could stand, holding the world upon his shoulders. All existence depended on him. His breath became the wind, his voice the thunder, and his movements dictated the passage of time. Day after day, night after night, he stood, watching the world solidify and gain strength. When at last he felt that the sky would no longer fall, that the earth was sufficiently robust, and order had been established, he closed his eyes and collapsed. His body could no longer sustain the world, but it was no longer necessary. The universe could now exist independently. Across the world, his final roar echoed as a tempestuous wind, his voice a last rumble of thunder. As he fell, his body became an integral part of what he had created. His flesh transformed into earth, his blood into great rivers, his hair into forests, and his bones into mountain ranges. Even his sweat, falling in drops, gave rise to the first rains. What became of his spirit? Some say it dispersed throughout the world, imbuing it with strength. Others claim that from his last breath, the first gods arose to continue his work. Still others believe that from his spirit, the first man emerged, destined to usher in this new earth. Thus concluded the journey of the giant who shaped the cosmos. The great sun demands sacrifice. No world is born without effort. All creation requires exertion. The profound order of the universe did not arise spontaneously. It was built, sustained, and safeguarded. But Pangu merely laid the foundation. Heaven and earth were separated, yet they remained empty. The world was vast but devoid of life. Its history had yet to unfold. When Pangu fell, his body became the world. But the universe remained incomplete. Mountains, rivers, forests, and clouds already existed, but their movements were chaotic. Water flowed aimlessly. Wind swept across the plains without restraint. But there was no law to direct its course, to give it rhythm, and to make it truly alive. Thus yin and yang emerged, forces that permeated all realities, binding everything together. Yang was light, fire, the sun, and movement. It ascended, warmed, and fostered strength and growth. Yin was darkness, moisture, the moon, and tranquility. It descended, cooled, and brought peace. They did not battle, but complemented each other. Where Yang kindled a flame, Yin provided water to prevent it from becoming uncontrollable. Where Yang moved the wind, Yin transformed it into rain, filling the rivers. Yang created thunder, and Yin the ensuing silence. One could not exist without the other, for light cannot be without shadow, and movement is meaningless without rest. But the world was not divided into two distinct halves. It was woven from the interplay of these forces. If Yang were pure and perfect, it would incinerate all living things. If Yin became absolute, the world would freeze, plunging into eternal stillness. In every ray of sunlight, there is a sliver of shadow. In every night a glimmer of light. Everything flows, transforms, and turns into its opposite. This is how day and night appeared, summer and winter, life and death. Everything born must eventually vanish, but from disappearance something new will arise once more. The people living in this world did not merely observe this law, they studied it. Water, for instance, can be too violent, overflowing its banks, or it can stagnate, turning into a swamp. They realize that a person who only works without rest will burn out, and one who lives in constant peace will wither. They understood that rigidity and flexibility must be balanced, that the world does not progress linearly but cyclically. Thus, yin and yang became the very essence of the universe. They were present in the rhythm of human life, in the changing seasons, in the breath of nature. They represented a law that no one issued, but to which all were subject. Among those who appeared after Pangu's demise was Nua. It is said she was born alongside the first streams, when the world first found its balance. Her form was extraordinary. From above, she resembled a beautiful woman, but below her waist, a long serpentine tail began, covered in scales, fluid and smooth like flowing rivers. She could move across the land, glide on water, and ascend to the clouds without encountering any obstacles. Nuwa was a goddess, a creator, but not a ruler. Unlike the Jade Emperor who governed the heavens, she had no interest in power. Her purpose was different. She wished to create beings who would inhabit this world, experience it, understand it, and imbue it with meaning. She wandered the earth for a long time, studying forests and mountains, contemplating what life should truly be. She observed clouds drifting in the sky like rivers, finding their path to the sea, and fire dancing in the wind. This introspection was a yearning for her own unique path, free from imposed will or reason. Then, she resolved to create a creature that could be part of the world, yet also possess the ability to shape it. She stopped by the bank of one of the great rivers, knelt down, dipped her hand into the soft clay, and began to sculpt. Her fingers moved with confidence, imbued with love and care, as if working with something precious and fragile. She sculpted the first human, a small being resembling herself, but with two legs instead of a tail, and slender arms capable of creation. She breathed upon him, and he stirred. At first, he looked frightened, but then he stood up, looked around, took a step, then another. He saw the sky, heard the sound of water, felt the warm air on his skin, and smiled. He felt joy. She realized she had accomplished something wondrous and desired more such beings. She sculpted one after another, and soon new humans appeared beside the first. They clasped hands, laughed, and gazed at the world with delight. Nuwa watched them, realizing that if she sculpted each one individually, the creation of the world would take an eternity. So she devised a new method. She took a rope, dipped it in the liquid clay, and began to swing it through the air. Drops of mud flew in various directions, falling to the ground, and each one transformed into a person. The world quickly filled with life. The voices of people echoed across plains and hills, along riverbanks and mountain slopes. But soon she noticed that not all people were the same. Those she had sculpted with her hands were strong, thoughtful, noble, and wise. Those who emerged from the drops of clay were rough and imperfect, common folk, artisans, peasants, and servants. Thus, social inequality emerged in the world. The nobles were born from the goddess's hands, while commoners arose from random splatters. Yet Nuwa loved all her children, making no distinction between them. She taught them to live in harmony. The strong were to lead, the wise were to teach, but everyone was important and an integral part of the world. However, her story did not end there. When the world was already teeming with life, one day the sky, supported by great pillars, split and cracked. Dark storms descended upon the earth. Fires consumed the forests, rivers overflowed their banks, and fiery stones rained from the sky, destroying everything in their path. The people she had created screamed in fear, hiding, but there was no escape. Nuwa then realized that if she did not mend this, peace would dissolve into chaos. She journeyed to a great turtle, requested its legs, and lifted the sky, preventing its collapse. She gathered multicolored stones and melted them. Nuwa felt that her time on this earth was drawing to a close. She knew she would no longer walk among people, witness sunrises, or hear the laughter of those she had created. But she no longer had to fear for them. She watched how people rebuilt their homes, raised their children, passed on their knowledge, and forged their future. Her creation now lived its own life. They say that upon dying, Nuwa dissolved into the world she had created. Her spirit remained in the stones and clay, in the wind and water, in the breath of every person. She did not vanish, but became a part of all her children. Since then, the Chinese have believed that every person carries a piece of divine power within them, that everyone has a destiny to leave their mark. But the world continued its own course. The gods, born with the universe, wandered among them, but there was no ruler, no court, no law. The world was ungovernable. Then appeared the one destined to ascend the celestial throne, the Jade Emperor. Unlike the primordial gods, his role was to be different. He arrived when the universe already existed and brought to it what it lacked: order. But the path to power was not easy. They say he was once mortal, one who strived for perfection, studied the art of governance, comprehended the wisdom of heaven and earth, and sought harmony in every movement. Over the years, he grew wiser but did not age. His will, spirit, and mind grew stronger until, one day, he crossed the threshold, separating man from immortal. Then he rose above the mortal world and even above the heavens themselves. He came to a place where there was no power, but where it was desperately needed. And when confusion began to spread among the gods, when discord threatened to shatter the heavens, he was the one who quelled the chaos. He ascended the throne of the heavenly palace through his own righteousness and wisdom, and from that moment, the world transformed. Now every god had their designated place. Those responsible for water received dominion over the rivers. Those who controlled the winds were no longer aimless wanderers. Their pronouncements were now sought. The gods of thunder, rain, sun, and moon knew when their time would come. Even the underworlds no longer operated in disorder. Now, the souls of the departed were judged there, not by the whim of spirits, but by strict laws. Thus, eternal order was established. However, the Jade Emperor was not a god who descended to interact with mortals, nor one who interfered in their destinies. He sat on his throne, surrounded by celestial officials, observing the universe, issuing decrees, and presiding over courts among the gods. Throughout the centuries of his reign, he repeatedly encountered those who dared to challenge him. Great spirits rose against him, attempting to depose him from his throne. Demons sought to breach the heavenly palace. Yet, despite rebellions and insurrections, he remained on his throne. Dynasties of mortals rose and fell. Rulers of the earthly realms appeared and vanished. But in heaven, no one could usurp his position. But his dominion extended beyond the gods. Below, in the rivers, forests, and mountains, resided other forces, spirits that were not gods, but could still influence the fate of mortals, and not all of them were benevolent. While the emperor ruled the heavens, even his power could not encompass everything at once. The universe was too vast, its laws too complex, and its events too numerous. He could not personally oversee the reigns and monitor the fates of all mortals. Like any earthly emperor, he required officials, ministers, and judges to manage the affairs of the heavenly palace. Thus, a divine bureaucracy emerged, a structure of power that permeated everything, from the highest celestial chambers to the mortal world, and even the depths of the afterlife. Each god held a specific position, each official responsible for their designated domain within the universe. If the rain fell too early or too late, if a ship was caught in a storm, and a person died unexpectedly, it was not a matter of chance, but a decision from the heavenly palace. When a thunderstorm erupted in the world, it was not merely a display of elemental forces, but a decree sent from heaven, the execution of a judgment made by the gods who commanded the elements. The thunderstorm was overseen by Lei Gong, the god of thunder. He was not a deity of mercy. His task was to punish. In his hands, he held a hammer with which he struck a drum, causing thunder to rumble. They say a long list of criminals resided within his grasp, and when he identified those who had committed evil, he would strike. The divine departments decided when the land would receive rain and when it would parch, when crops perished from drought or fields were devastated by heavy downpours. It signified that the divine administration had made its choice. The wind fell under the jurisdiction of Feng Bo, the god of air currents. If a storm arose at sea, trees snapped under gusting squalls, it was under his purview. But even these were merely components of a colossal system. Beyond the elements, there were even more intricate matters, such as life and destiny, which were handled by entirely different officials. The heavens decided not only when it would rain or thunder, but also the fate of every mortal, what life path they should follow, whether it would be prosperous or unhappy. For this, the Department of Fates was responsible, presided over by the heavenly scribe, Simin. He penned the scrolls of life and death, inscribing the names of all who were born and all who died. When a child was born, their fate was already predetermined, their successes and failures already charted. There were also the three stars of fortune, Lu, Shou, and Fu, representing happiness, longevity, and wealth. They could alter a person's destiny, but only if they truly deserved it through their actions. Others maintained the Book of Reincarnations, detailing the future incarnation of each soul. But the most formidable was the department that monitored those who violated the laws of the universe. For them, an afterlife court awaited, to which souls were sent after death. If a person escaped earthly punishment, it was certain to find them there. The Jade Emperor did not personally scrutinize every case. He established a system, and it operated flawlessly. Everything occurred not by chance, but according to a meticulously crafted plan. A person might live under the illusion of free will, but their life was already inscribed in the celestial archives, and whatever befell them was merely the fulfillment of a decision made long ago. The heavenly palace governed the universe, but people rarely turned their gaze toward the distant emperor. The great gods sat on their thrones, issuing commands and recording destinies, but their will concerned the general order, not the life of each individual. People sought protectors, patrons, those who would hear their voices, understand their concerns, and offer assistance not in the abstract sense of cosmic order, but in concrete, earthly matters. Such beings became the gods who were once mortals, whose valor and strength elevated them beyond ordinary humanity. They lived among mortals and understood the struggle for truth and self-realization, and it was to them that people turned for guidance. They were placed on par with ancient forces because they were tangible figures who could alter a person's destiny. The name Guan Yu was known to all who had ever heard tales of unwavering duty and fortitude. He was a general, a man whose renown preceded him. When his earthly life concluded, individuals like him do not vanish, nor become nameless shadows in the stream of reincarnation. He remained to continue as a shield for those fighting for justice, becoming the god of war, where power belonged to those who defended truth. His image adorned the homes of judges, the shops of merchants, and the halls of military leaders. He was unyielding, invoked in moments requiring more than mere martial skill, when one needed to stand firm until the very end, even against the world's might. But not everyone sought martial prowess. People desired prosperity. They established markets, opened bazaars, and sought fortune in a world where labor did not always yield results, and wealth could either appear or vanish. There was a belief that luck was a force that could be attracted if one knew how. Kai Shen was the one who could bestow the favor of fate. He was not asked for wealth out of greed. He was revered by those who understood that work is the foundation of all. Yet even the most skilled artisan could find themselves without reward if the stars did not align favorably. His emblems signified a successful year. His statues stood in shops, for even the most astute merchants knew that without his blessing, a deal could falter. Seeking his aid meant acknowledging that the world is driven not only by effort, but also by the favor of higher powers. They approached him with offerings, for only those who knew how to share could receive. But even wealth held no value if there was no justice in the world. One could be brave or lucky, but if the land one inhabited was mired in iniquity, if evil went unpunished and truth could be bought, then neither strength nor gold held any purpose in such a world. Every city required someone to safeguard it from corruption, but his influence was felt on every street. His spirit resided within the city walls. He was an invisible observer, aware of everything occurring in the alleyways. He saw all that people tried to conceal and ensured that crimes did not go unaddressed. Those who sought to deceive justice feared him more than earthly judges, for human law could be circumvented, but no one could hide from Hu Yi. Those who evaded punishment met their end without understanding how their secret was revealed. Before him, all bowed. These were living forces with whom people felt a connection. Each day they did not demand worship, but the respect they commanded was stronger than the fear of distant celestial beings, for their will could alter a mortal's life here and now. However, alongside those who protected and bestowed luck, there were others who lived in the shadows, behind one's back. and in careless words best left unspoken. These were creatures that belonged neither to humans nor to gods. They were feared, bargains were struck with them, and efforts were made to appease them. They served as a perpetual reminder that death is not always the end of existence. Some chose to pursue well being, while others plunged into vices. But one day, his path concluded. His body grew cold and still, and it seemed that all was irrevocably lost. Yet, if death meant farewell for the living, for the soul, it marked the beginning of a new journey. When this moment arrived, no one met her with consolation. Before her gates opened, behind which lay the realm of Yan Wang. There was no sun, but an ashen sky stretched over endless plains, veiled by a haze through which a deathly light barely penetrated. There was no wind, yet the silence was filled with the whispers of other destinies, the voices of those who had already undergone their trial and awaited rebirth. In the center of this kingdom stood a black palace, accessible by stone bridges. On both sides of the path stood spirit guides, pale and faceless, their ethereal figures propelling them towards the ruler of this world. Beyond the colossal gates of the palace began the Hall of Taisho. Towering massive, as if carved from the very night itself, it was adorned with intricate patterns resembling tongues of fire. There, in the depths of darkness, resided Yan Wang, the lord of the afterlife. His face resembled a stone mask, motionless, devoid of motion. His eyes glowed from within with a dim, yellow light, like the reflection of a candle in an ancient bronze mirror. He spoke no unnecessary words, asked no questions, for the answers already lay before him. In his hands, he held the scroll of destinies, unrolled and covered with endless lines detailing every life, every thought, and every action. But he himself did not decide the soul's fate. 10 judges served under him, each ruling in their own palace located in the depths of the afterlife. The soul began its journey in the first hall, where its past was revealed without embellishment. A person might forget what they did during life, might fail to reflect on their actions, might justify themselves to others, but here they saw everything as if reliving each choice. One judge examined the purity of thoughts, another the intentions behind actions. A third observed how one treated others, who suffered because of them, and who received aid. The fourth assessed the pain one brought into the world, even if they themselves were unaware. There was no way to lie, turn away, or flee. With each new step, their life became clearer, like a pattern formed from scattered lines. These halls were passed through without delay. The judges merely observed, allowing the soul to proceed further. The path led the soul to the wheel of fate, which rotated in the center of Yan Wang's palace. It resembled a vast disk carved from luminous stone, inscribed with ancient symbols whose lines glowed with a soft bluish light. Within it flickered endless reflections. In its depths flowed the rivers of time, shimmering with the faces of those who had once lived and those yet to be born. The wheel moved silently. Its rotation never ceased. It did not remember names, but was governed by destiny. If the path taken was righteous, the new body would be a vessel for a joyful life. If the path was wicked, the new body became a prison, and life a difficult trial. The wheel guided everyone where their own choices led. But not everyone reached this place. Some, whose lives left behind too much destruction, found their journey halted among the subterranean halls. Their karma was too heavy. and they could not depart so easily. The judges sent them to atonement, where they had to experience the pain they themselves had inflicted. A man who destroyed others' lives now witnessed his own unraveling. The one who caused suffering now endured it. He who knew no pity learned what it meant to stand before those to whom he had done wrong. It was not a punishment, but a reflection of his own path, albeit seen through the eyes of others. When all was concluded, the doors opened once more, and the wheel of fate accepted the soul. Its light embraced it, and in an instant it vanished into a new existence. A person might forget everything that had come before, but karma remained with them, influencing their future path and their encounters with the world, the trials that awaited them. Life could erase memory, but the universe forgot nothing. The realm of the dead did not always release those who left their bodies. Some souls completed the trial, accepted their fate, dissolved into the wheel of fate, and moved on. But it also happened that the transition was interrupted. Something caused the soul to linger, reaching for a world where it no longer belonged. Thus Gui appeared, restless spirits who could not proceed further. Some remained harmless, returning to their homes, their presence felt as a chill, a premonition that sank the heart. Some believed that Guy were protectors, who did not wish to vanish without a trace, and that if an offering was left at the door, they would depart peacefully. Others said that the souls of those who were forgotten began to grow angry, that if no one remembered the deceased, they transformed into hungry shadows that no longer understood their purpose. But there were also those who refused to relinquish life, held back by hatred, vengeance, or anger. They sought no understanding, expected no notice. They desired those who had condemned them to death to suffer as they once had. They could be sensed in misfortunes that struck without reason, in disturbing dreams, and in reflections where something was amiss. Their victims fell ill, lost luck, and went mad, unable to comprehend what was happening to them. People left a fire at the door to prevent Guy from entering, hung red amulets, and burned incense. But if a spirit had already chosen its victim, it was difficult to escape. Sometimes it meant that someone was destined to die. Yet even the most dangerous Guy were still human souls. They remembered who they were, what they had lost, and what they lacked to move on. They could be angry, but they understood the pain of loss. Mogwai, in turn, were even more perilous. They belonged neither to the world of the living nor the afterlife. They were not born and did not die. They simply existed. They could not be seen unless they wished to be noticed. Mogwai waited until a person willingly opened the door for them. They did not try to frighten people, but acted more subtly. They would whisper, their voices merging with thoughts, and the person would not even realize that something had changed. They did not command death or issue orders. They merely posed questions. And if you never achieved what you desired, they would laugh behind your back. You would feel it, and the person would begin to believe that these questions originated from within them. Sometimes, Gui could be glimpsed at the periphery of vision, a mere silhouette, an indistinct figure in a reflection, or a slight movement in the darkness. Then they would draw closer, appearing where they should not be. They spoke in voices that the person longed to hear. That is why people feared mirrors, for they were ordinary objects, yet they could reveal something that did not belong to this world. It was said that at night, mirrors should not be left uncovered in the darkness. for they did not merely reflect, they invited. Sometimes something extra could be seen in them, for example, movement that did not exist in reality. It was said that if you looked into such a mirror for too long, it began to look back. Superstitions were not born without reason. One could not place 4 candles in a room. 4 sounded the same as the word for death. In empty corridors, it was best not to turn around if you heard footsteps. If someone called your name at night, you should not answer immediately. Nature obeyed its laws, but behind its order lay ancient forces that governed the waters, rains, and winds. Their presence was felt in the wind that rushed by like the breath of a colossal creature. In the Chinese tradition, the primary embodiment of these forces was the dragon, the guardian of balance, and the link between heaven and earth. Its image accompanied emperors from the most ancient times. Its retinue represented wisdom and an understanding of the balance of power. Unlike predatory animals that display their strength through brute force, the dragon possessed secret knowledge, allowing it to symbolize the law sent down by the universe itself. But while one dragon could be the patron of rulers, others governed nature. 4 dragon kings were the guardians of the seas and rivers, the lords of rains and tides. They were revered because no people, no state could exist without water. The king of the eastern sea presided over the vastness of the ocean. His abode rested at the bottom, amidst coral gardens, and his retinue consisted of the spirits of waves and water serpents that controlled the ebb and flow. He decided the fate of ships, brought down storms, and could direct fish into nets or leave fishing boats empty-handed. The king of the southern sea commanded the rivers and rains. His will determined when it would rain, how full the rivers would be, which lands would receive a harvest, and which would remain dry. When droughts threatened villages, priests turned to him, performing rituals at sacred springs. In his honor, temples of rain were built, where prayers were accompanied by offerings of jade amulets and sacrificial water. The king of the western sea guarded the sources of mountain rivers, from which water flowed into the valleys. His palace was situated among icy lakes. His breath turned snow into silence, and if he willed it, he would reveal ancient knowledge hidden deep within the snowy peaks. The king of the northern sea was the keeper of the depths. Its waters remained cold and motionless, yet ancient secrets lay hidden within them. It was said that his palaces were in a place where the sun never shone, and in his domains resided forces inaccessible even to the gods. If his anger stirred the waters and caused floods, it was a sign that something more significant than mere earthly affairs had been violated. Dragons did not forgive neglect. Ancient chronicles record instances where people attempted to alter the natural course of waterways. During the Tang Dynasty, an official ordered the course of a great river to be changed to protect his lands from floods. As soon as the work commenced, the sky darkened with clouds, a storm erupted, and the waters surged with such force that entire villages were submerged. The people saw in this the vengeance of the dragons, and the emperor was compelled to issue a decree prohibiting interference with riverbeds without special permission. But waters were not the only entities with guardians. Forests, mountains, and plains were inhabited by spirits whose influence was felt throughout China. Some were benevolent, aiding those who understood their language. Others chastised carelessness. But all were part of a unified world where humans were merely one of its inhabitants. Therefore, their peaks belonged to immortal spirits. They were powerful, but rarely interfered in mortal affairs. Some patronized monks and hermits, others guarded the entrances to hidden realms, and still others tested those who dared intrude upon their territory. One of the most renowned spirits was Shan Chui, the deity of mountain streams. He governed eternal snow-capped peaks and controlled the waters that flowed down, filling the rivers. When people built temples on the slopes, they brought him offerings, leaving vessels filled with pure spring water. If a stream dried up during a storm, it was considered a sign that the spirit was displeased. However, among the mountain spirits, there were also devourers. They dwelled in caves amidst misty gorges and deceived travelers, luring them with mountain springs. Legends claimed they could assume human form, but their reflection in water always retained a bestial aspect. The rivers of China were always living beings. They could be generous with the fertility of their lands, sustaining entire settlements. Their spirits existed as tangible forces with whom one had to be able to negotiate. The Great Yellow River, Huanghe, had numerous guardian spirits. The most revered was an old man clad in white, residing in the river's depths. He could appear to people, warning of impending floods or, conversely, promising a bountiful season for farmers. Legends said he often tested people by offering them bargains, and if a mortal displayed greed or disrespect, the spirit could flood his village or condemn him to a life of wandering, forever unable to return home. There were also river ghosts, in whose waters the souls of the drowned hid. It was believed that at night in such places, one could hear them calling travelers by name, hoping to lure them to their doom. To protect themselves on the banks, they erected stone altars and lit lanterns, preventing the spirits from coming ashore. Among all the natural spirits, trees were considered the keepers of memory. They lived longer than humans, witnessed generations pass, and some of them could converse with those who knew how to listen. In Chinese villages, it was customary to offer respect to the spirits of trees. Cypress and pine trees were particularly revered, considered symbols of longevity. It was believed that by embracing the trunk of such a tree and listening intently, one could hear the voices of ancestors whispering advice to those ready to receive it. Peach trees held special power. They grew in the gardens of the gods, and their fruits granted immortality. In homes, they were believed to ward off evil spirits. During holidays, front doors were adorned with peach amulets, and if illness struck, a piece of bark was burned to cleanse the space. There were also cursed groves where no birds sang, and ancient trees with gnarled branches that seemed to belong to spirits best left undisturbed. In Chinese culture, humanity was never the master of nature. One could live in harmony with it, honor its power, and seek its blessings. But if the balance and respect were forgotten, nature would remind humanity of itself with ceaseless rains, overflowing rivers, and roads swallowed by fog. He who understood these signs could live in harmony with the surrounding world. He who ignored them became part of another legend told around the fire. But while nature followed its own laws, the human world demanded order. This order was created by people themselves, passing down traditions from generation to generation, solidifying the connections between living beings. These connections were forged over centuries, but most profoundly strengthened by Confucianism, the philosophy that became the bedrock of Chinese civilization. Confucius lived in an era when the country was ravaged by warring factions and armies annihilated cities. He developed a system of thought that was not a catalog of divine decrees. He studied the texts of previous sages, reviewed ancient rituals, and sought in history the patterns by which states became strong and people virtuous. He concluded that the stability of society rested on proper human relationships, where everyone fulfilled their designated role, where the younger respected the elder, and the ruler cared for their subjects. The Chinese world was structured such that the family formed the foundation of everything. An individual was part of a clan, a link between past and future generations. Confucius asserted that if order prevailed in the family, it would extend to the state. If a person respected their parents and honored their memory after death, they would also respect their ruler and adhere to traditions. In every home, there was an altar to ancestors, where tablets bearing the names of deceased relatives were kept. Offerings of tea, rice, and incense were presented to them. It was believed that the departed continued to exist among their descendants, guiding them, protecting them, and observing their actions. If a family forgot their ancestors, they lost their blessing. This principle was equally important. The father was the head of the family. His word was law. A son had no right to argue with his father, even if he believed the father was mistaken. Obedience was not considered weakness. On the contrary, it was a mark of nobility. Even if the father erred, the son had to respectfully remind him of his duty, but never openly contradict him. This principle extended to the entire society. The emperor was the father of the nation, obligated to rule justly, care for his people, and serve as a moral example. If he violated this order, ruling cruelly and unfairly, he forfeited the heavenly mandate bestowed from above, the right to govern the country. In such instances, the people were entitled to rebel, and his overthrow was considered not a revolt, but a restoration of natural harmony. Each individual had a purpose. Confucius identified 5 fundamental types of relationships that structured society: the ruler and the subject, the emperor must rule wisely, and the people must respect him; father and son, the father cares for the son, and the son honors the father; husband and wife, the husband leads the wife, family, and the wife obeys, but he is obligated to protect and care for her; elder brother and younger brother, the younger obeys the elder, and the elder cares for the younger; and finally, friends, the only relationship based on equality and mutual respect. If a person understood their role and performed it correctly, the world remained stable and harmonious. Confucius valued education and knowledge. In Chinese culture, the most respected individual was the scholar. Confucius stated that a country should not be governed by inheritance, but only by those who demonstrated their wisdom. Therefore, a system of state examinations was introduced, determining who was worthy of holding high office. Those aspiring to become officials underwent rigorous tests, confined to small rooms for days, where they had to compose treatises on morality, state structure, and history. Only the most outstanding earned the right to serve the state. Even in the 10th century, when in many countries power was still inherited, in China, the principal rulers were those who could prove their wisdom. Confucianism permeated everyday life, influencing manners and traditions. Every gesture, every word, even facial expressions mattered. When conversing with an elder, direct eye contact was considered disrespectful. Upon meeting a person of high rank, A proper bow was essential. Disputes were to be conducted calmly, in a low tone, and with decorum. Confucianism fostered a world where power resided with the wisest, asserting a strict order where everyone occupied their designated place, and traditions were passed down invariably through generations. Yet, alongside this philosophy, existed another that rejected rigid frameworks and strict rules, advocating instead to follow the natural flow of life. This was the way, a philosophy where the universe's inherent disorder resolved into perfect order. This school of thought emerged as a counterpoint to the rigid doctrines of Confucianism. It did not prioritize establishing an ideal society or prescribe stringent rules. Instead, it advocated for aligning oneself with the natural unfolding of existence, trusting in the intrinsic wisdom of nature over man made regulations. The way posited that the cosmos inherently exists in a state of flawless balance, and human interference only serves to disrupt this equilibrium. Its central tenet revolved around the principle of non assertion, or effortless action. This did not signify complete idleness. Rather, it implied a rejection of forcing change upon the world or struggling against the inevitable course of events. One should not attempt to control that which is already progressing optimally. Just as water encountering an obstruction simply navigates around it, an individual who has grasped the way should not stubbornly persist where yielding is called for. They should refrain from forcing their way through when an alternative path exists. While Confucianism emphasized structure, the proponents of the way perceived it in the fluidity and seamless progression of all things. Let the emperor govern the nation. If a wise individual holds power, they will not impose themselves, but will find a way to live such that authority has no bearing on their life. Let an official set forth regulations. Let them do so. True liberation lies not in adherence to laws, but in not being bound by them. Adherents of the way retreated to the mountains, eschewing royal courts and power, for they understood that all human accomplishments are ephemeral. Empires crumble, laws transform, yet the celestial bodies continue their cosmic dance, and the rivers relentlessly flow to the sea, unconcerned with who currently holds dominion over the earth. Unlike their Confucian counterparts, they found that articulating their insights was futile, for any verbal description inherently diminishes their essence. One of the foundational texts of the Way, the Tao Te Ching, attributed to Lao Tzu, commences with the declaration, "The way that can be spoken is not the eternal way." This philosophy not only dismissed the necessity of strict legislation, but also proposed a path that transcended the very limitations of the human experience. Where Confucianism focused on societal roles, the Way explored the possibility of surpassing one's inherent human nature. The adherents believed that embracing the Way was not merely a quest for equilibrium, but also a journey toward perpetuity. They held that by living in accordance with the natural order, purifying the body and mind of detrimental influences, and mastering the esoteric arts of vital energy and balance, one could extend their lifespan or even attain eternal life. In pursuit of this state, they developed alchemical techniques, concocted elixirs of longevity, and searched for the ultimate life-giving draught. They meticulously studied flora and fauna, recognizing that proper energetic cultivation represented a method for transforming both the corporeal and spiritual aspects of a person. Certain adepts of the Way vanished from the world, becoming the subject of legends. It was said they could transform into clouds, traverse to other realms, and dissolve back into the fabric of nature. Ancient records document individuals who ventured into the mountains and were never seen again, or of a traveler observed for decades who showed no signs of aging. These were referred to as immortals, beings who had grasped the fundamental truth of existence prior to its inception. The way permeated daily life, shaping Chinese medicine, martial arts, and the practices of energy cultivation, like Qigong and Tai Chi. It imparted the wisdom of living in harmony with one's body, the natural world, and oneself. It taught that health is a state of energetic equilibrium, and illness signifies a disruption in the flow of vital forces, suggesting that appropriate movement and respiration could restore a person's lost wholeness. Masters of martial arts assimilated the way's principles of pliability and fluidity, the ability to yield in combat to ultimately prevail. In contrast to philosophies advocating brute strength, the way proposed leveraging an opponent's momentum, evading direct confrontation, and refraining from forceful breakthroughs. If Confucius was characterized by his adherence to strict principles, the follower of the way was viewed as a sagacious wanderer, one who chuckled at human preoccupations, effortlessly navigating the river of life without attempting to alter its course. They understood the transient nature of all things, that everything eventually passes, and it is precisely this understanding that grants them freedom. It was said that sages of the way could transform into the wind, walk upon clouds, and vanish beyond the tangible realm. Even if these were mere tales, their philosophy genuinely bestowed inner liberation upon individuals. They embraced change without fear, detached themselves from earthly attachments, and refused to be subservient to the dictates of others. Their interest lay not in the architecture of society, but in the profound mysteries of existence itself, and in methods to prolong or even transcend the boundaries of human life. They believed that by comprehending the way, one could achieve immortality. But what if immortality is not the ultimate objective, but merely another illusion? What if a soul has already experienced countless lifetimes and will continue to do so until it is released from the unending cycle of rebirth? A new doctrine, Buddhism, entered the landscape of Chinese thought, presenting a fundamentally different portrayal of the cosmos. Unlike Confucianism, which established a strict terrestrial order, and the Way, which advocated for dissolving into the universal flow, Buddhism delved deeper. It addressed the very essence of existence, the nature of suffering, the origins of human affliction, and the path to liberation. It offered not just a philosophical framework, but also a beacon of hope. If individuals are ensnared in suffering and their world is rife with pain and injustice, this is not an arbitrary circumstance, but the consequence of their prior actions. According to Buddhism, karma is the law of cause and effect, an unseen force connecting the past, present, and future. Every action undertaken by a person leaves an imprint and generates causes that will manifest in subsequent lives. A life of good deeds leads to a prosperous future existence, while a life of malice invites suffering. No supplications or offerings to spirits can alter this immutable law. Each individual alone bears responsibility for their destiny. The concept of samsara, the ceaseless cycle of birth and death, profoundly impacted Chinese culture. A person expires, but their consciousness persists, reappearing in a new physical form, And so the cycle continues until nirvana, or complete emancipation and enlightenment, is attained. However, this state was not readily accessible to everyone. More often, people were tethered to the world by their desires. These passions impelled them to err, influencing their karma, and inevitably drawing them back into the realm of suffering. Even beyond death, a trial of the afterlife awaited them. Within Chinese Buddhism, notions of the afterlife intermingled with traditional beliefs concerning the departed's fate. The actions of the deceased were scrutinized, their good and bad deeds weighed. If an individual led a virtuous life, they might be reborn into more favorable circumstances. Conversely, if their spirit was burdened, they might face descent into lower realms where they would expiate their transgressions. Yet, such retribution was temporary. Once sins were absolved, the soul would once again ascend. The belief in a world offering a new opportunity, Buddhism not only elucidated suffering, but also provided examples of those who had successfully transcended this worldly existence. The teaching featured Buddhas, those rare beings who achieved nirvana and freed themselves from the cycle of rebirth. A Buddha is not a name but a state, the highest level of development for a sentient being, having personally apprehended the ultimate truth. A notable Buddha was one who renounced power and riches to comprehend the nature of suffering and discover the path to liberation. Alongside Buddhism, the veneration of bodhisattvas entered Chinese culture. Beings who had achieved enlightenment but voluntarily deferred their passage to nirvana to aid others. The most venerated of these, Avalokiteshvara, offers solace to those seeking salvation. Her gentle and compassionate image became one of the most beloved figures in the Chinese religious tradition. Buddhism did not dismiss existing beliefs, but rather integrated into the tapestry of Chinese religiosity. It offered people the assurance that suffering is not an immutable sentence, but a trial that can be overcome. It taught that the reality we perceive is merely a transient illusion, that all things are in flux, and no individual is bound to a single existence. If Confucianism dictated that a person must occupy their designated place in the world, in the way advised to move with the prevailing current, then Buddhism proposed transcending existence itself, breaking free from the cycle of reincarnation, and achieving a state devoid of pain, suffering, or even the passage of time. We have already explored the formation of the Chinese belief system. We have discussed the pantheon of deities and the rigid hierarchy of the celestial palace. Philosophical frameworks that shaped not only spiritual beliefs, but also the very essence of existence were examined. Chinese mythology is replete with tales of individuals who profoundly altered their world, mastered natural forces, and defied divine beings. Their extraordinary accomplishments laid the foundation for what China became and how future generations perceived it. In antiquity, when the world was not yet in balance with humanity, when rivers coursed untamed and mountains rose spontaneously, China faced a catastrophic deluge. Water surged over its banks, submerging settlements, obliterating farmlands, and erasing roadways. The entire realm transformed into a vast expanse of water, and no one could bring the elements under control. People perished from starvation, wildlife abandoned their habitats, and rain fell incessantly as if the celestial gates had permanently opened. The initial effort to combat this calamity was undertaken by the father of Gong Yu. He constructed embankments and established barriers, but the sheer force of the water proved too great. It breached his defenses, exploited structural weaknesses, and dismantled all his work. For a decade, he wrestled with the river, yet victory remained elusive. Consequently, the emperor decreed his execution and entrusted the monumental task of taming the flood to his son, Yu. Yu did not replicate his father's unsuccessful strategies. He understood that containment was futile. Water's nature was to flow and thus needed to be guided. Instead of erecting further barriers, he initiated the excavation of canals, carving new courses for the rivers to establish a natural drainage network. He traversed all of China, meticulously studying the terrain and observing the rivers, seeking methods to subjugate them, not through brute force, but through intelligent application of natural principles. Legends recount that he toiled for 13 years without respite, personally excavating the earth and forging new channels. He passed his own home, hearing his wife's voice, yet did not enter. Had he paused even momentarily, the floodwaters might have consumed the nation. His relentless efforts bore fruit. The rivers ceased their destructive overflow, water found new paths, and China experienced a rebirth. In recognition of his unparalleled achievement, the people acclaimed him emperor, and he established the first great Chinese dynasty. The narrative of Yu became a potent emblem of human perseverance, intellectual prowess, and a profound connection with the natural world. He demonstrated that one can not only subdue, but also forge an alliance with the elements. Another compelling legend speaks of 10 sons, offspring of the great heavenly Lord, who initially appeared sequentially in the sky to provide warmth to the earth. However, one day, succumbing to ennui, all 10 suns ascended simultaneously. Their combined radiance and heat became unbearable. Rivers evaporated, vegetation withered under the intense heat, and the world began to succumb to conflagration. The great heavenly Lord, unable to restrain his sons, summoned the preeminent archer, Hao. He bestowed upon him a divine bow and 10 arrows, commanding him to rescue the world from impending doom. Hao took aim and began to bring down the suns one by one. 9 celestial bodies plummeted from the sky, leaving but a single one to prevent the world from descending into perpetual darkness. The populace rejoiced in his victory, but the celestial deities were enraged. Hao became a hero under a curse. Humanity forfeited divine favor, and its destiny no longer rested with the heavens. Recognizing his mortal condition, facing inevitable aging and death, he embarked on a quest for the elixir of immortality. His extensive travels eventually led him to Shi Wangmu, the revered sovereign of the Western paradise. She gifted him a potion capable of elevating him to the heavens. However, he delayed its consumption, desiring to share it with his beloved wife, Chang'e. One day, during his absence, Chang'e discovered the elixir. Recalling her husband's mortal fate, she consumed it herself. Legend holds that she ascended to the sky, not to join the ranks of the gods, but to become an eternal inhabitant of the moon, forever solitary and irrevocably separated from earth. Hao lost everything. He had saved the world, but could not save himself. His name endured as a legend, yet he remained an exiled mortal among his people, a poignant reminder that even a hero can fall victim to the consequences of their choices. The subsequent myth recounts the exploits of 8 sages who transcended mortal boundaries, communed with deities over wine, ascended to the heavens, and returned at will. They were known as the Eight Immortals, eight transcendents who unlocked the secret to eternal life. Each attained immortality through their unique path, disregarding human conventions. They understood that the world operates as a game and mastered its intricacies. Lu Dongbin was a valiant warrior, an exceptionally skilled swordsman, and an individual destined for a distinguished career in the imperial court. He aspired to fame and momentous conflicts. However, one day, while slumbering in a tavern, he experienced a dream. In this vision, he lived an entire life, achieving official status, accumulating wealth, and starting a family. Years elapsed, only to be followed by betrayal, the collapse of his career, the confiscation of his property, and the complete loss of all he possessed. He grew old alone and died unfulfilled. Upon awakening, he comprehended that his entire life had been a mere illusion, and worldly success a fleeting mirage destined to vanish. He then renounced his former life, embarked on a journey, and encountered an immortal mentor who illuminated his path. Thus Lu Dongbin learned that immortality resides not in renown, but in its renunciation. Once upon a time, Li Tieguai was a revered sage with a robust physique and a handsome countenance. One day, he dispatched his spirit on an astral journey, leaving his physical body behind for several days. Upon his return, however, his body had already been cremated, leaving him suspended between realms. He then inhabited the first available vessel, that of a lame beggar, an elderly man leaning on an iron cane. People mocked his grotesque appearance, but he merely laughed in response. He was no longer confined to the limitations of mortality. He had crossed the threshold between the mortal and the immortal, and earthly trivialities no longer concerned him. He possessed the ability to transmute lead into gold, yet he bestowed his wealth solely upon the destitute. He could perform miracles, but preferred to jest at the foolish and the avaricious. He traversed the earth as a wanderer, with eternity itself following in his wake. Han Shangzi was born into an aristocratic lineage, yet worldly learning held no allure for him. He discovered the world's secrets in music, wandering through fields and mountains, listening to the rustling of leaves, the melodic flow of water in streams, and the silent descent of snow. It was said that, when he played his flute, flowers bloomed even in winter, and birds perched on his shoulder, captivated by his melody. He understood the language of nature and one day vanished, dissolving into music and becoming an integral part of it. Zhang Guolao, a Taoist master, was renowned for his solitary journeys upon a white donkey. When questioned about his unusual practice, he would laugh and retort that while they perceived time as linear, it moved in reverse, and that their understanding of direction was merely following in others' footsteps. His donkey could materialize and dematerialize at will. Zhang Guolao possessed foresight but never directly revealed the future, offering only enigmatic riddles. He understood that all truths are relative. Reality is an illusion, and the optimal way to comprehend the world is to perceive it differently from everyone else. He Zhangguo commenced her spiritual path as a teenager when a Taoist teacher presented her with the magical peach of immortality. Following this, her body felt as light as a cloud, and she could subsist without sustenance. She journeyed extensively and one day simply ascended into the heavens, dissolving into the dawn. Lan Kaihe was the most eccentric of the immortals. He wore tattered garments, walked barefoot, sang in the streets, and frequently feigned madness. He mingled with people but remained detached from them. If offered money, he would often cast it into a river or distribute it to the poor. He would chuckle at the wealthy, understanding that their gold was merely dust. He never explained his actions, but one day, before a crowd, he sang a new melody and ascended into the sky, disappearing amidst the clouds. Cao Guojiu, an aristocrat and the brother of the empress, possessed everything. However, one day, he witnessed the pervasive corruption of court life, the rampant deceit, avarice, and animosity within its walls. He abandoned the palace, donned simple attire, and became a wanderer. He sought truth until he encountered other immortals who revealed to him that material wealth is an illusion and that true power lies in liberation from earthly attachments. Previously, we explored myths that shaped worldviews and elucidated the workings of the cosmos. Now, we transition to a different narrative. This is not an ancient myth, nor a legend rooted in the mists of time, but rather the great literary epic of China, Journey to the West. This work, influenced by Buddhist and other philosophical concepts, was brought to life by the pen of a writer. The book, authored in the 15th century by Wu Chenghen, chronicles the pilgrimage of the Buddhist monk Xuanzang to India in quest of sacred sutras. However, as is often the case, the central figure is not the one undertaking the journey, but rather the one who instigates chaos. Such a character is Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, a being who repeatedly defied all conventions, disrupting the narrative. Journey to the West is a literary novel. The character of the Monkey King embodies ancient Chinese notions of rebellion, the pursuit of immortality, the defiance of gods, and the punishment for hubris. It is the story of a hero who gained immense power but lacked the wisdom to wield it appropriately. He challenged the very fabric of existence. Emerging from a stone imbued with the celestial and terrestrial energies, absorbing the world's magic, he immediately recognized his unique nature. He possessed strength, cunning, an insatiable thirst for knowledge, and an overwhelming desire for autonomy. He embarked on a quest, studied martial arts, and sought wisdom until he encountered a Taoist master who revealed to him the secret of eternal life and bestowed upon him 72 transformations, granting him the ability to alter his appearance, assuming the form of any creature, spirit, or even inanimate object. Yet, immortality alone proved insufficient. He ventured into the underwater kingdom of the Dragon King and claimed his supreme treasure, the golden-banded cudgel, Ruyi Jingu Bang, capable of expanding from the size of a needle to a colossal pillar that could prop up the sky. This staff, once used to support the world ocean, now served as a weapon in the hands of a monkey. Now possessing immortality, proficient in Taoist magic, able to transform into any being, and wielding the world's most potent weapon, his initial impulse was not to maintain equilibrium, but to assert his superiority over the gods. Realizing his unparalleled strength, he declared himself ruler of the heavens. He appeared before the Jade Emperor, the chief deity of the Chinese pantheon, demanding recognition of his power. The gods, seeking to avert conflict, attempted to lure him to heaven through stratagem. The emperor offered him the title of stable master, responsible for tending to the heavenly horses. Perceiving this as a profound insult, he destroyed the stables, stormed the celestial palaces and proclaimed himself the great sage equal to heaven, a being who transcended the need for titles, for he himself was above all of them. Thus began a war. Heavenly generals, armies of gods, and mythical creatures. None could subdue Sun Wukong. He vanquished all, mockingly deflecting lightning, parrying spears, and striking down the celestial hordes with his cudgel. He was invulnerable and unstoppable. In their desperation, the heavenly emperor invoked the aid of the Buddha, the only being capable of restraining him. The Buddha employed no weapons and sought no reinforcements. He simply extended his hand and stated, "You are mighty, but if your strength is truly so great, try to leap beyond my palm." Sun Wukong, confident this was another trick, leaped. In a single bound, he traversed the sky, soaring past clouds, stars, and the outermost limits of the universe until he reached 5 immense pillars. Believing these to be the boundaries of the world, he inscribed his mark and returned satisfied. However, upon landing, he discovered he had been on the palm of the Buddha the entire time. The 5 pillars were merely his fingers. At that precise moment, the Buddha closed his hand, transforming it into a massive stone mountain under which the monkey was imprisoned for 500 years. His rebellion was quashed, and brute force proved powerless against profound wisdom. Yet, the story does not conclude there. One day, when protection was required for the monk Xuanzang on his journey to India for the sacred sutras, the monkey was released. However, he was no longer the same. He had to learn humility, patience, and the understanding that power is not merely the capacity for destruction, but also the responsibility to protect. Thus commenced his journey to the West, a path of redemption intended to transform a rebel into a true hero. It is the story of the Monkey King who challenged the very foundations of existence, the story of one who recognized no boundaries and feared no gods. But it is also a narrative illustrating how even the greatest power is meaningless without an understanding of one's own destiny. We have traversed a considerable distance through the myths and legends of ancient China. These are not merely tales of the past. They are a reflection of the Chinese perspective on the world and their quest for harmony. They continue to live on in their culture, literature, and cinema. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. I hope you found it engaging. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you soon.